Shalom, everybody. The weeks of mourning for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash are approaching, and as Chazal teach us that any generation in which the Beit Hamikdash is not rebuilt is equivalent to the generation that the Beit Hamikdash is destroyed. Since we have not merited the rebuilding of the Beit Hamikdash, we have to realize that the defects in Klal Yisrael, in the Jewish people, that caused the destruction still exist, and they're well entrenched. So the first step in planning a solution to any problem is to analyze accurately and deeply what the problem is. So I want to start with a Medrash Rabbi in Bamidbar, and over the next couple of weeks we're going to be exploring the causes of the destruction and some of the remedies. So the Medrash Rabbi teaches us that even when the Jewish people are worshiping idols, if they are united, shalom beinehem, it says that the Satan cannot prosecute them. They're insulated from prosecution from the Satan. When there's divisiveness, so then they're open to prosecution for all of their shortcomings. And the conclusion of the Midrash is, Gadol HaShalom, Snua HaMachloket. Peace and harmony is desired by God, and dispute and strife is hated. So what is the source for such a far-reaching conclusion? Besides the technical verses that Rabbi Elazar brings in that Midrash, we have to see where did he get this idea from. So the root of all of the destructions and all of the fast days that we're going to be observing over the next month and a half are built on two sins that the Jews did in the desert. And I want to contrast the two sins that are at the root of these fast days. So Shivosar B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, so the sin that is at the root of that fast day and the destructions and tragedies that happen on that day, the sin is the sin of the golden calf. Moshe Rabbeinu was at Sinai, he didn't come down on time, the Jews miscalculated, they built the golden calf, Moshe comes down, sees it, and breaks the luchot, breaks the tablets. That happened on Shivosar B'Tammuz. That sin is the root of all of the tragedies of the 17th of Tammuz. 3 weeks later, we're going to have Tisha B'Av, and that destruction is built on the sin of the spies, the sin of the Meraglim that we read in Parshat Shlach just recently. So, if we're going to contrast the two sins, the Chet HaEgel and the Chet HaMeraglim, and the tragedies that were generated from it and the fast days that are built on it, we look at the contrast between the sin of Avodah Zarah, the golden calf, and the sin of the spies, which really is a little bit nebulous. They didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael, they spoke Lashon Hara, but somehow or other we don't think that the sin of the spies is equated or more serious than the sin of the golden calf. And yet, we find that first of all, Tisha B'Av is a much stricter fast, and the tragedies of Tisha B'Av that are listed in the Mishnah are much more serious. Shivosar B'Tammuz was the day that the walls of the old city were breached, but it was 3 weeks later that the temple was destroyed. Obviously, breaching the walls, while it's tragic, is no comparison to the tragedy of the destruction of the temple. So when we look at the fast days that are connected, it appears that the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies, was worse. When we look at the punishment that was delivered to the Jewish people on a national level for the two sins, we also see a very strange hierarchy. In the golden calf, only 3,000 people who actually participated in the sin died. The rest of the nation, the punishment for Klal Yisrael, was given what we could call on the installment plan. It says, Biyom pakdi upakadati. God said, I'm going to forgive the sin, and I'm only going to collect punishment in little doses anytime I have to punish the Jewish people for a sin in the future. So that seems to be a much more benign punishment than the punishment for the Meraglim, where the entire nation had to die out to atone for that sin. So it's clear that the sin of the Meraglim was much more serious than the sin of the golden calf. And we have to understand Why? In our book, whatever happened when the Jews didn't want to go into Israel doesn't seem to be as serious as the Avodah Zarah of the golden calf. And I believe that that's the root of Rabbi Elazar's lesson, that Afilu Yisrael Ovdim Avodah Zarah Bizman Shesholom Beinehem, if they're doing it in a united way, they're insulated from the Satan. The Jewish people got to Sinai and they arrived Ki'ish Echad Belev Echad. They were united. And they received the Torah because of that unity. And there's no indication that that unity evaporated when they made a mistake of Moshe Rabbeinu coming down and they built the golden calf. They wanted that to be in place of Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no indication that the unity that they had in any way changed. So they did a sin of Avodah Zarah, the golden calf, but they did it with that unity that existed when they received the Torah. The spies, on the other hand, were motivated by a desire to remain in the desert because they felt that it was better for them and their desire on how they would serve God, better that they should stay in the desert, which is a spiritual environment. There are no challenges. They didn't want to leave that comfortable spiritual environment. They didn't want to have to go into Israel where they're going to have to plow and plant and fight natural wars. And they convinced the people of this, that we're much better off in the desert. But what's the motivation there? It's a very self-centered perspective. They're saying this is good for us as individuals to be in this kind of an environment. And they weren't looking, what does God want? How do I serve God? But they looked, how do they want to do it? So whenever you have a self-centered perspective, true unity is impossible. Because every person is working with their personal agendas. And if they get together, and you could maybe have people getting together when they have a common agenda, but it's personal, so then you really just have lots of individuals who happen coincidentally to have aligned agendas. That's not real unity. So the root of machlokas is always self-centered, it's always personal interest, and that machlokas that emanates from self-centeredness and personal interests, that's what's hated by Hashem. When egos are eliminated and true unity is created, so then the lesson is that even when the nation may be making a mistake, but the unity that they have mitigates against serious punishment. That was the lesson, that even when they're worshiping idols, if they do it with unity, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can forego immediate punishment. So the Shivasar B'Tammuz fast was the forerunner of tragedies that the Maral points out are all reversible. The breaching of the walls, each of the tragedies that are pointed out. Whereas Tisha B'Av was a fundamental breach of our ability to properly serve God because it's built on self-centeredness, and then, as we're going to see next week, which leads to the destruction of the temple because of Sinat Chinam.